Sit. We got all three of them. This is Zeus, this is Bindi, and this is Buster. Zeus, this is their roadmap to success. Sit, sit, sit. First tip, always say the command word after the treat goes in the dog's mouth. So basically in the video above, we went over how you can teach the dogs to behave at the door. And that video kind of has a microcosm of what I do for a living. I show people how to break things down in individual steps. When it comes to most dog behavior problems, the first question I ask my clients is, have you taught the dog how you want it to behave in that situation? The guardians here don't like dogs barking and jumping up and running through the door. Well, if we haven't taught the dogs what we want them to do, then that's really our fault if the dogs don't do the way we want them to behave, the way we want them to. So what I did for that video is I broke down entering the door into individual steps. The first step is to create a command word that means go away from the door. In this case, Diego. This is a very subtle hint that I want some attention. So we want to practice that step independent of all the rest of the things. Then the next step is walking towards the door and keeping the dogs behind the line. And once the dogs do that, only then do I move the next step of reaching for the handle of the door. But I'm not even touching it. I'm just reaching and pulling back, reaching and pulling back. And eventually we get to the point where we can go through all the individual steps of the activity. The dog knows now how you want it to behave through all those individual steps. Then we start making it more and more difficult by bringing all the steps together and then making it more and more realistic until we get back to the real world situation of people coming to our door unexpected. Now the dogs know how to behave. Now, the Guardians have gone to one of my dog behavior workshops, and at Talking Dog, that workshop I talked about rules, structured feeding, and they're already starting to see some benefits from those things. I went over petting with a purpose and passive training because those are things they were a little bit hazy on. Passive training or petting with a purpose is Zeus. Come here, buddy. So Zeus is a big nudger like that. So if I pet him, then I'm telling him, yes, when you tell the humans what to do, they'll do it. Zeus, see if we can do it again. Sit. Sit. So what I'm saying is when you tell me what to do, nothing happens. But if I tell you what to do, there's a reward involved. There's a motivator. And now a lot of them also like to put their paw on top of you. You're petting a dog and it puts a paw on top of you. Stop petting. Stop engaging with your dog. Stopping engaging with your dog at times when they do things you don't want, with precise timing is a great way of saying no. So if I'm petting the dog and everything's going great and then he pulls his paw up and I stop, or even before, and a lot of people wait until the dog goes here before they stop petting. I would stop when the dog raises its paw, just starting to raise it off the floor. So this way the dog starts to understand that through the human's actions, when I'm doing things they like, they pet me. When I'm doing things they don't like, they stop petting me. Come. That's passive training, which we're going to talk about here in a second. So for petting with a purpose, if the dog nudges or tells the humans what to do, we don't do it. We give them a counter order. When they sit, Buster, sit. We pet under the chin and say the word sit. Or this come, this is more passive training, come, more passive training, which I'm going to talk about in a sec. So basically we ask the dog to do something to earn our affection. If they're already sitting, ask them to sit over here, or ask them to lay down. Just do something different in order to earn that affection. Now, after a while, the dogs are going to come and start sitting in front of you to prepay for attention. When they do, make sure we recognize that. We have a couple watchwords. I say paycheck if I suspect somebody is petting without a purpose. So if somebody comes in and says paycheck, they would assume that I forgot to ask the dog to do it because she's still standing. So I'd stop petting, say sit, and when she sits, then I pet her under her chin, preferably. Sit. Remember, you have 3 seconds to correct or reward your dog, so make sure you're doing it right away. And say just the word sit. So chill, if that's, I think, the word the Guardians are going to use. So that's passive training, which I'm going to talk about, I swear, in 1 sec. So basically, if somebody sees I'm petting the dog and the dog looks like it's in a position where it hasn't offered a behavior that we want, we say paycheck, that person stops petting, tells the dog to sit, pets the way I just showed you, and then tells the person, I asked him to sit, you just missed it. That way the dog sees the humans are all Watusi on the same page. Passive training is waiting for the dog to organically offer you a behavior that you like and recognizing it and marking it with the command word and exclusively the command word. Not yes, not good dog, not good sit, just sit. Every time the dog comes to you, pet it and say come. Every time the dog lays down, pet it and say chill. Every time it sits, every time it grumbles, pet her and say grumble. I tell one of my dogs to stretch this way. Every time a dog brings you a toy, you can name all the individual toys. And the more of the vocabulary we come up with, the easier it is for the dogs to understand and perform well for us. I also went over how to teach the dogs. So passive training and petting with a purpose are the two easiest things that you can do if you get into a habit of doing them. It'll take a little bit of practice, but if you guys are consistent for a month or so, you'll find yourself getting that habit. Now, I use a hand motion to get a dog to sit and to come. So Make them sit. I go over arc over their head, and then I pet under the chin. He didn't sit, so I'm not petting him. I'm only rewarding. Come, you did give. That's passive training. So if the dog's not coming to you, start lowering. So see, can you see Buster in the shot? Buster. Then when he gets to where I want, I raise it an arc over his head. When he sits, I pet him. I drop it under. If I let him lick the treat off my hand, if I had one, and I pet him under his chin. When a dog feels good about itself, his nose is parallel to the ground or tilted up. So try to, whenever possible, pet them under here. Come. Okay, so you can shift it back this way. All right, so we also went over the importance of rules and structure. Dogs go through life probing to determine where boundaries are, but also who the leaders are. The leaders are who are enforcing boundaries. And learn through consistency, repetition, and good timing. Well, if we don't have any rules, we can't be consistent, and we can't have good timing if we don't have any rules because they have to be based on something. So some of the key factors the dog learn from, they can't learn if we don't have any rules. And we will oftentimes look at rules and enforcing rules as being mean, but it's really confusing for dogs because they're probing to actually ask, is it cool for me to do this? Is it cool for me to do that? And if we don't say no, then we're saying yes. So the more that we enforce rules, the more we can help them feel more comfortable and confident about us. Let me see. The dogs also like to get excited, so I showed the guardians how to make the dog sit at the door and then break down opening the door into individual steps. Now the first step is just reaching for the door. And I didn't even touch the handle, and Bindi kept on it. Just this moment would get her up. So I stopped, told her to sit. If I had to say sit more than a couple times, then I would walk away, but I would try to stay in that area. As soon as she sits, then I reach again. So break it down several times without even touching it. And then go to each individual step as you go through. Until you can do all of them in the easiest capacity. Because we have 3 dogs, I would recommend the guardians practice with all the dogs individually, and then bring the best 2 dogs together, and eventually all 3 dogs together. Now, Buster's ears are so far back for a lot of the session, I think that he is a little bit out of sorts at times, and the puppy might be an exasperating factor. So if they're playing a lot, you might want to bust Buster off to the side and give him some time, or put Bindi away in her kennel, just for 10-15 minutes, give him a chance to relax. And also if you see him trying to move away from her, that's a good time to intercede as well. I went over the 4 escalating consequences for the dogs come to disagree. And the guardians might also want to teach the dogs to stay. Stay is a great way, so you can put them in a stay and then go answer the door, do other things. If you forget, if I don't have it listed above or in this write-up, just message me. I can share a link on how to teach your dogs to stay. Come. Yes. Oh, look at that. See that chin go up? He feels good about himself. Every dog likes a butt rub. Yes. Okay. Let me see. So, I just lost my train of thought, but it will come back to me. Exercise. Start an exercise journal. Write down the dates and times, the time. Do a column for each dog on the same sheet, and then write down the time, how long the walk was, the time, how many fetches. One of the things we talked about was throwing treats up and down the stairs, and making that an exercise. So we throw a treat down the stairs, maybe we go down the stairs, maybe we call that Mexico. And then we go up the stairs, maybe we call that Oregon, because the guardians used to live in Colorado or in California, so we can use a little geography. Whatever works for you guys. Try to come up with fun command words. The fun, especially when we have dogs with some behavior problems, if we come up with chill means lay down, charge means run, or whatever it is, it just kind of brightens the mood of everyone. It helps the dogs feel a little bit more comfortable. And we don't have territorial or aggressive dogs, but just whenever possible, try to come up with funny command words. Start the exercise journal do that for a month. Write down the time and whatever it was, and then for each dog at the end of and whatever all the activities are, also put down what time you feed them, if they have a barking incident or whatever. And then at the end of the day, give each dog a letter grade, A through F. And then the next day, give them a couple more fetches or an extra whole game of fetch, and throw those things out and keep on varying around with or varying all the elements until eventually the dogs all have an A+ day. Now, Bindi is going to need more exercise and stimulation than the older dogs. Another great way to exercise them is scent games. And you can just Google scent games. There's books on it where you can hide treats and teach the dogs to use their nose. It's very draining for them because they're using their brain, which they don't use very often. Let me see. Other rules, you have to sit at the door, not being allowed the people who are eating, not be allowed in the kitchen where we're eating, making them sit before we go, or stay before we go up and down stairs, not letting them out of the door before the human first, and things along those lines. The more that we reward desired actions, behaviors, the more they will start emulating them. Make sure you get the nails done kind of quickly, because dog nails too long can crack and splinter, and sometimes you have to amputate the nail. And also be on the lookout for Zeus. I think it's his front right paw. He was licking at his dew claw, so it might be. It wasn't ingrown, but it might be some irritant or something like that might be in there. Sit. I'd also let me see. You might want to give them or come up with a list of the command words and paste that up somewhere, and say vocabulary. If somebody's saying come here, well, the word is come. So if we make it easier for the dog by using just exclusively their command word, it makes it easier for them to perform at optimal levels. Let me see. The laser was also something that Bindi was interested in chasing. She didn't seem too manic for that. And also, if you're going to have guests come over or people like that, make sure you over-exercise your dogs before the people come over. Put them in a position to succeed by depleting all that excess energy. People come over, and I'll use the same joke that I used earlier. Your dogs are so well behaved, they're so chill. Of course, I had David from Dog Gun come. But no, what we did is we exercised them properly beforehand, and now they are, have all that excess energy, and they're just plopping on the floor, and it looks like you have well-behaved dogs, so they've just been satisfied their exercise requirement. Go to the green spot. I would also get like some, especially for Zeus. Zeus is a little bit heavy. Using green beans will help. And you might want to, if you have the ability to, during the summertime when people are here, feed him 3 times a day. I'm trying to lose weight, and I'm eating 5 times a day. After this, I'm going to go eat 4 ounces of chicken at Chipotle, just a little shooter of chicken. But by doing that, your metabolism starts working, and you're burning energy throughout the day. You might also want to get like a dog backpack for the dogs. You put like a couple bottles of water or sand or something like that in there. That makes the walk a little bit more efficient. So those are things you might want to consider. And then the other thing is for her, she's still not quite a year, so you might want to consider getting her like in our 301 puppy class, where we work on loose leash training. She's probably the best with the dogs, but with the leash. But this was a nice way to burn some excess energy for her and her develop even more social skills, which will help. Goldens are usually pretty easy to deal with, and she seems like that's the case for her, but you never know. Okay, is there anything else I'm forgetting? Practice the Diego thing separately. Come up with a Diego version for your porch. Maybe you call that Oceanside or whatever it is. And if you have questions or problems, make sure you call or text me. If I don't hear from you, I assume everything is going well. So if there are problems, please text me sooner rather than later. Usually if you text me right away, it's a quick phone call. We don't need to do it. Now, Buster does have some dog reactivity. I remember what I was going to say earlier. Buster has some reactivity, so if he continues like that, then let us know. We can set up a behavior adjustment 1-hour limited session where I bring another dog over and I can show you how to help him practice a new behavior. Now the dogs are also very barky, and we have an invisible fence because we're kind of a lake here, and we can't have one. So basically the dogs are good with that, but they go and bark at people who pass by, and the front of the house is kind of in a nice spot where they have a big area that the dogs can defend. Well, what I would have the guardians do is, there's kids in the house, get some string cheese, chop the section up so that you have chunks that may be 1 inch by inch square. I like white because you can see it easier when you're throwing it on grass. And then basically when somebody's coming by, on the times where people are going to come by, have somebody, one of the kids, like halfway, maybe 20 feet outside your property line over here, another one 20 feet that way, and do this during the the high time when a lot of people are coming home from work or are going to be out walking their dogs. And just ask the people, just say, hey, we have an electric fence, so our dogs can't come on the sidewalk, but they love to bark at people. We're trying to teach them that people coming by is a good thing. Would you mind just tossing this piece of cheese across to the dog? And then when he gets to the middle of the yard, toss the second piece. Now, when you're doing this, only have one of your dogs out at a time, so practice them separately. So after a while, the dog runs up to the person throws cheese. And you might want to give them a little bit of that cheese yourself walking by, and so they understand it's a good, acceptable thing. Well, after a while, the dogs start looking at people coming by. They're not invaders. These are my cheese delivery service. I like these people. I'm not going to bark at them. I'm actually going to wag my tail. And if you do this maybe for a week or two, you'll start noticing when people come, they don't bark. They're just going and sitting at the fence waiting for these people to drop some cheese. So one dog might need a lot more practice than the others. But again, the benefit of using positive reinforcement. Unfortunately, the Guardians here used Dylan's dog training a couple years ago. Fortunately, they didn't feel comfortable about it because he uses a lot of force and dominance, which we don't like to use. They're 3 good dogs. None of them need it. And so we want the dogs to want to do what we want them to do. By breaking down the activities, teaching them how to do it, and using positive reinforcers, the dogs responded really well, and I don't see any reason why the Guardians can't practice this as well. For the door exercise, I mentioned in the video above, but practice that yourselves. When you're coming home, call or text whoever's at home, make sure the door is closed, and then practice the door ritual when it's other people. That way, when you have real guests come up, the dogs are already on autopilot. Okay, Bindi, can we finish the video with you? Bindi. Oh, we're gonna get 2. See, can we get all 3, you think? Buster. Oh, I didn't throw it, buddy. Sit. This is Zeus, this is Bindi, and this is Buster. And this is their roadmap to success. Remember, everything you do trains your dog, only sometimes you mean it.